r/AskReddit. Redditors with thin walls. What have you heard in your apartment? My old neighbor was a cam girl and I could hear absolutely everything she said in every single session for a good 4 months. Pretty much learned the names of her clients. I work from home and it was always a gamble whenever I had to meet with someone virtually. I've heard and felt the neighbors upstairs having sex. And apparently they like to rearrange the furniture at least twice a week. William. We do not hit. His mom was visiting. He was 30. Heard the couple next door arguing. The wife was furious because she realized he had been cheating on her after she found out she had chlamydia. He tried to convince her that she must have been the unfaithful one. She still lives there. He doesn't. Yeah girl. You know you want this dick. My college roommate. 3 kids later it's apparent she did. In fact. Want it. In our old apartment our upstairs neighbor had extremely loud, theatrically enthusiastic sex in the middle of the day. The puzzle was that he would stop in the middle and we'd hear him walk to where the bathroom is. Stay there for a minute or two and then walk back and resume in the bedroom. It was the same pattern every time. We could never figure out what that was all about. Any ideas welcomed. Not in my house. But I travel a lot for work and stay in a lot of hotels. So far my favorite was hearing someone banging around in the shower for a while then this exchange. Loudly, hey. Wash my balls. Louder, wash your own goddamned balls. Yelling, fuck you. Your pussy stinks. They got quiet after that. Probably because they heard me howling with laughter and realized people could hear them. I moved from far away. So I have a different state license plate than everyone else at the apartment complex. A couple of days ago I had my upstairs neighbor drunkenly ranting to his wife about what he thinks I'm up to. He's convinced that I'm on the run from something. I'm just in grad school mayo. An argument about money while I was doing the dishes. It ended with a slam door and one of them on a piano. Hitting the keys like a maniac. Some people read. Some people go get something to eat. Some people exercise. This motherfucker relieves stress by going crazy on a piano. Lol. I lived next to a guy who took care of his disabled girlfriend. She stayed home with a nurse while he worked to support them and pay for her healthcare. Everyone really admired him for it. He used to get drunk and tell her that if she doesn't start putting out he's gonna throw her ass out. Gina. I love you. Gina no. Gina. Damn it, put the knife down. At this point, both the apartments adjoining to Gina's called the police. Gina's husband decided to spend the night elsewhere. I once heard a former roommate laughing with his then girlfriend about how they're fucking me over on money. But turned out they were taking my utility portion and buying various games and alcohol. Instead of confronting them, I confirmed what they said with the utilities company. They hadn't paid the bill as 2 months, and I moved all my stuff out that day while they were at work. For good measure, I took myself off the lease and told them about the GF that had been there 6 months. My university accommodation had paper thin walls. You could hear people having sex 5 doors down. And I could hear my friend's music from even further away. Lots of fucking. My presumably constipated neighbor trying to poop. Aka 5 minutes of grunting and heavy breathing. Someone snoring like what I can only describe as a diesel truck revving its engine. A little girl practicing playing what I think was a violin every night for a while. Someone blasting Middle Eastern music. I Shazamed it and the song is called Mundian to Barken. What sounded like a woman forcing herself to puke. With lots of crying. IDK if she had food poisoning. Or was bulimic or what. Edit. Apparently the song is Indian. Not Middle Eastern. I honestly had no idea. I lived next to a couple some years ago and they came home after a night out and started fighting about who was better at darts. I thought they were joking but it got pretty heated. Doors were slammed. Edit. Since people are asking. They were playing darts at the bar earlier that night. From what I could tell they were playing as a team and the boyfriend wasn't pulling his weight and was super defensive about it. Had an off night. Allegedly. The girlfriend was mad he couldn't accept she was better. I'm no detective but think they had some relationship issues bigger than darts. More what my neighbor heard. I'm a deep sleeper and was an even deeper sleeper as a teenager. My phone alarm was going off for 30 minutes and my neighbors could hear it through the walls. Assumed it was a burglar alarm and called the police. Waking up to the police banging on my door was confusing. I heard the couple that used to live next door go through divorce. Their yelling got progressively worse until I realized that their relationship really wasn't healthy. Once she mentioned that they had split up and that she was moving, I was like, yeah, I know. The way my old apartments were laid out. The neighbor's bedroom was right next to my kitchen dining room. One night, I hear them banging. Thin walls are thinner when the bed is hitting the wall. While I was fixing dinner, I just turned up the music and continued on with my life. 2 hours later, I was cleaning up, doing dishes, and generally tidying up when I heard the familiar thump 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 of banging. I think, good for them, and bag up the trash to take out. Thump thump thump. I open the door and take my bag of trash outside. As I'm walking out, I see the male half of my thumping neighbors walking in from his car. Walking back from the dumpster, I see a half-naked dude running out of the neighbor's apartment. They moved shortly after that. When I was an older teenager, I had my own tiny apartment in the hood and a raging arsehole gang member for a boyfriend. We would get in raucous fights and my downstairs neighbor would call the police. One time, I was crying quietly after a particularly bad fight that had gotten physical and I heard my neighbor arguing with her husband. No, I'm not going to mind my own business and ignore it. I don't care that he always comes back the next day and she forgives him. One day he's going to really hurt her or kill her, and I'm not going to live with knowing that I sat there and did nothing when I knew a girl was being abused. I was naive and in love. I thought and ignorant and young, and I had never considered it abuse. That felt so melodramatic, but I realized that my neighbor was right. Finally left him for good after that fight. So, good looking out random lady in East LA in 1999. I'm sorry for being the worst neighbor imaginable. Couple upstairs would argue frequently. One particular evening, they had an epic battle. It was hours long. About 2 hours into the argument, 11 PM on a weeknight, we heard the woman shout first of all. That was the moment we knew sleeping wouldn't be restful that night. My male neighbor from India belting out "Hello" by Adele at the top of his lungs. It was magical. I could hear my neighbor fart, and when her phone went off on vibrate, it was like having roommates I couldn't see. I can hear when my neighbors vacuum. Our building tends to vacuum together as a result. I hear my upstairs neighbor and go, oh hey, I should vacuum, haven't done that in a while and it's already noisy. Then my downstairs neighbor and my left hand neighbor start vacuuming. It's kinda hilarious. My right hand neighbor doesn't vacuum with us but does sing opera while doing dishes. Someone sneezed. We said bless you. They laughed. Upstairs neighbors were a single mom and teenage daughter. They were very loud. The mom's room was above my room. One day I had off and was woken up by sex upstairs. It was pretty common in the previous couple weeks. This time, though, someone came in and started screaming, "You're having sex in MYYYYY bed." Turns out the daughter had been skipping school and coming back to the apartment with her boyfriend. They were the ones having sex in the mom's bed. The fight that ensued should have earned both women awards. My ex-neighbors never let their kids leave the house and preferred to raise bubble children. The older son, 12 or 13, was pitifully fragile. One day I heard him crying because he shit on his own hands. I shared a wall with a Buddhist temple, so a lot of chanting and gonging. It was an awesome 5 years. They warned me about you. I never should have married you. My 60-year neighbors. And recently a heated argument between different neighbors' adult kids. The son had caught his son, 5-year-old, playing doctor with his sister's daughter, 4-year-old. They argued very loudly about it in their back garden, which is completely surrounded by other houses and apartments. I think at least 30 households could hear it. Edit. Playing doctor means getting naked and comparing bits. My roommate talking to himself. I sometimes laughed quietly at his jokes. Edit. Since you all are asking, they're not really jokes, but just random, silly things he said. Our neighbors were once talking loud and I was nosy, so I put my ear up to the wall and realized she was reading him Harry Potter pretty enthusiastically, and it made my heart melt. I heard my roommates having sex very loudly. I didn't say anything at the moment but sat them down the next day and talked about it. Turns out the boyfriend was at work during the time it happened. Edit. Thanks for my first silver. I have never gotten one. This is awesome how much attention this got. The people above me bang at exactly 1 PM every day. I'm not here then most days. But when I am it sucks. They have the squeakiest bed ever and it's so loud it sounds like it's in my room. Our whole apartment can hear it. They really do invest in a better bed frame or whatever. Heard my neighbors having sex when I lived in my previous apartment. Our bedrooms shared a wall. This in itself is not unusual. It was like, give me your fucking baby. Make me pregnant. Daddy waking me up at 2 AM that killed my soul. Fuck you. Man. If you don't like spaghetti, then you don't like me. My friend's boyfriend doing Ace Ventura and Austin Powers impressions to make her laugh. What can only be described as my flatmate having phone sex while using Christian Bale's Batman voice. When I was in grad school I lived below a family with several young kids. The mother was great and we got along well. She was always apologetic about kid noise. But I didn't really mind. The compromise that worked for us was that it was okay for me to play an amplified guitar. As long as it wasn't late. Because her kids liked it and would dance to it when they could hear it. My landlord fucking his wife couple of times per week. She screamed like a porn star. They were on the first floor and I was on the second one. Sometimes if I'd walk above their bedroom and they heard it they'd stop for a couple of seconds and go right back to Boner Town after. Edit. Forgot something. So yeah, we were 3 guys living in the apartment and we'd often invite some girls over, friends, to have dinner and drinks, but we would usually stay up pretty late and it would be in the middle of the week. Pretty much once a week. They were the kind of girls who talk pretty loud. And our landlord asked us if we were having orgies. He wasn't even kidding. Didn't know how to respond to that. So we just laughed it off and kept him wondering. Neighbor worked out and hired a new sitter. New sitter invited 2 guys over. Kids were only 3 and one heard her say if we leave to go to the corner store now, the kids will be fine alone for 20 minutes. And heard them talking about popping some of mom's Xanax and selling them. Then they promptly left. I walked out, knocked on the door and the 3-year-old boy came out. I called the police. Went into the apartment, found mom's work number next to the sink and she was furious. Left work and came back home and she was walking up to thank me and the officers. The babysitter and guys came into the complex. Mind you, this was all within an hour. Not 20 minutes lol. Mom whooped babysitter. Then called babysitter's mom and she got another whoopin'. Got offered a sitting job after that and took it. Lol. Also have heard one of my neighbors talking in tongues and yodeling. Glad I don't live in apartment anymore. Not quite what I've heard but more. Once I realized my previous apartment had very thin walls. My roommate and I would just yell at each other from our respective rooms if we needed something. It was great. No one had to leave bed. I've been hearing Don't Stop Believing by Journey every morning at least twice for about a month now. My dad snoring like a bear. And my mum snoring like a walrus. If they argue, they snore out of sync. And if they have a nice day they snore in sync. It's really quite sweet. Thanks for all the likes and comments everyone. I really didn't expect this to blow up in the way it has. Well, I hear my neighbors having sex quite often, but a few weeks ago I literally heard a full-on divorce. You're only with me for the crack. My next door neighbors. Edit. Guys. They're not Irish. They're white trash Dartmouth folk in Nova Scotia. Years ago I had an upstairs neighbor. At 2 AM. Every night. I would hear something sprint across the entire apartment. I realized 3 things. It was very fast. It took small strides. And it never deviated from its path. One day, I saw my neighbor outside and I said, I don't know how you have energy at 2 AM. He responded with, dude, I've been working the midnight to 8 AM shift for 15 years. Doesn't bother me at all. That night, I watched him leave his house, drive off, and waited 2 hours. At exactly 2 AM, I heard what sounded like 2 feet hit the floor in his bedroom, and the marathon started. A few weeks later, I see him outside. I tell him what I hear at night and he says, "That's strange. No one has my keys. It's just me and my rabbit up there." My flatmates and I had a joke that if someone used the upstairs washroom we would shout "I poopin'." One day someone above our top floor, the 3rd floor was studio apartments, screamed, "How the hell do you always know?" Edit. Polish it. I did not expect this. Thanks for the gold, silver, and upvotes. I lived in an apartment where the kids next door would begin kicking and banging on the walls and making all kind of noise on any given day, starting at around 6 to 7 AM and continuing for hours. I eventually came to find out that their mother would lock them in a bedroom and leave for hours on end to do God knows what. My neighbors had a party at 4 AM. They were playing Gangnam Style and some very bad country music. The mother screaming at her eldest son, "Why don't you love me? You never do anything around here. You don't love your siblings. You're horrible." Name. Inaudible wailing. So that's fun. I woke up one morning in a daze. Started walking down my stairs. I live in a townhouse condo, and paused and farted. Way louder than I expected. My neighbor next door started laughing so hard from her living room. My downstairs neighbor, a 40-something Moroccan gentleman, playing various video game songs on his piano for his son who came to visit. It was very cute and wholesome. Edit. A word. Pre-dawn hours. Blizzard outside. Everything still and quiet. My roommate and I heard our neighbor on the other side of the firewall fart, wet and deep like a stifled baritone sax, and exclaimed to himself in a twisted combination of awe and disgust, "Oh my god." We burst out laughing, and hear him chime in with pride, "Did you guys hear that?" Vindicated that his fart was heard and forever lives in our memories. Dude listening to Country Roads on loop for like 4 hours at like 2 in the morning. One day my neighbor was spontaneously singing the national anthem, America, and stopped midline and cussed because they messed up the words. So I sang the correct next line and they burst out laughing before coming back in and finishing the song with me. I've still never met that neighbor. 10/10 voice. My neighbor's drunk nephew singing the national anthem off key at 3 AM. My downstairs neighbors are a couple with a 1-year-old boy. The baby's room is right under mine. They speak so sweetly to him I'm not even mad that I can hear them so clearly. One morning the dad went in to get the baby out of bed and I hear him go, "Can you say daddy? Can you say daddy?" And in the tiniest little voice I heard daddy. My heart melted. Yesterday when I was taking a shit my neighbor was blasting classical music on full volume. It was the most majestic and relaxing shit I've taken in a long time. My parents told me stories about the apartment they lived in when I was a baby. The lady above us was a classically trained pianist and her music room was above my room. Apparently when I would start crying in my crib she would start playing and I would go right to sleep. After my parents divorced my dad stayed in the same apartment. A few years later when I went to visit him, I was about 10 or 11. I got to finally meet her for the first time. The woman who used to play me to sleep as a baby taught me how to play the piano 10 years later. Edit. Row. Thanks for my first silver, guys. I am sad to say I retained very little from our lessons. But I can play a mean chopsticks. Edit. And gold too. Okay, that's rad. Yeah, you'll like me. You really like me. Help me please. He won't let me go. I went and knocked on the door. Guy opened the door with his pants halfway down while a woman behind him kept screaming that he wouldn't let her go. He told me to fuck off and closed the door. I called the cops and apparently I stopped the guy from raping the girl. Felt good. I lived next to a guy who was schizophrenic. At first the stuff I would hear freaked me out, but after getting to know him I realized he was a really nice guy. There was some pretty sad stuff but some of it could be funny too. My favorite was when his voice took on this righteous southern preacher tone as he reprimanded all of his appliances like microwave oven. Are you going to join me in the afterlife? No. Miniature refrigerator. Are you going to escort me through the valley of the shadow of death? I think not. And then my favorite. Simply printer. Fuck off. An ex-girlfriend as I lived in an apartment with upstairs neighbors would yell and scream at each other on a constant basis. It came to a head when the woman started beating their dog. We heard the poor dog yipping and howling and ended up calling the cops, and they had their dog taken away. We also took in a kitten that they had that showed up at our door with its whiskers cut off and a cigarette burn on its head. The woman showed up at our door demanding her kitten back and backed down when we threatened to call the cops again. These people were not winners. They ended up being served an eviction notice eventually, squatted there anyway, and were arrested. I have no idea what happened to them after that. When I was young, around 10 years old, I remember sitting in my parents' room with my dad. We lived on a college campus and both heard, very clearly, a woman in the apartment next door getting the absolute crap beat out of her by a man. The next day we saw detectives, not just regular police, outside the apartment. I told my dad we should say something and he let me know that he didn't want to get involved. It still haunts me to this day 20 years later. Recently, downstairs girl has acquired a dog that she doesn't take on walks. She leaves at home, out of a crate. I hear her come home and yell, scream, throw shit at this poor dog. It's heartbreaking, and since no one else in the fourplex is home, I am kinda scared to call animal control in case this crazy bitch decides to make my life hell for reporting her. Suggestions welcome. This has been tearing at my conscience for the last 2 weeks. Edit. It's been reported. Father used to live in a trailer park. I have nothing against trailer parks, but this one was pretty bad. We heard a loud bang. Sounded like a .22. It wasn't overly loud. Then, did you get him? Voice 2. Yeah. He's dead alright. First voice. That'll teach him not to go near your drugs. Cops were called. Turns out these guys shot a cockroach with a handgun. Both arrested for drug charges. One with discharging a firearm improperly. Every night I would hear my hardcore alcoholic neighbor puke in the sink. Jam to her party music, usually Concrete Blonde on full blast. Puke again. Drag her fold-out bed out of the closet. Then turn on all her fans to go to bed. Her routine. I stopped hearing it. All I heard were the fans. Knew in my gut something was wrong, but kept pushing it away. I was avoiding her in order to build up some boundaries between us. Silence for 5 days straight. She had been dead in there for 5 days. Autopsy said heart and liver issue due to chronic alcoholism. After the body was removed, I let her son into her apartment as I had a spare key. Some decomposition on her roll-out bed, but no smell other than her usual smell. He thanked me for being the only regular person in her life, and I felt so guilty. Keep an ear out for silence. Friends. My neighbor has a lot of cats. If anyone who's encountered cats before, you know that when they're in heat, they tend to make these god-awful fucking screeching noises. It sounds like something out of a horror movie. One night I was sleeping after working a 16-hour shift only to hear that shit coming from the other side of my bedroom wall. I almost called the police. I once heard an argument that went a little like this. Stop treating me like I'm stupid. You asked if seahorses were mammals. Jessica. They live birth. Whilst at uni we lived next door to a 40-something-year-old guy who lived with his elderly mother. One time I was home alone studying and heard him play and sing a very aggressive version of the 60s Batman theme tune. Girlfriend and I were laying in bed at night. Was probably around 11:30 PM when we hear our neighbor scream. I fucking love tomatoes. And that was all that we heard. Heard through the wall of my bathroom. You been a hoe. But now you a freak. My neighbor's kid has a goddamn recorder. Enough said. Oh boy. My old neighbors were the absolute worst. Their apartment was behind mine, so we shared a bedroom wall. Loud sex as well as full-on fights at 4 AM. I heard the entire breakup. She told him to just leave. And he did. She wasn't expecting that, I guess, and spent the next several hours sobbing and yelling, "Why are you doing this to me?" She also called him about 40 times with no reply. then got to hear all her rebounds. One of which came over around 2 AM and couldn't keep it up, which led to her yelling at him. That didn't stop them though. They kept trying for hours, and when we knocked on the wall they fucking knocked back. Bitch. I have a job to get to in 3 hours. God, I hated her. Another time I overheard her almost overdose in the bathroom. The BF called her parents, who called an ambulance. When her BF left, she also stopped taking care of her dog. So she would just take it right outside her front door to shit and never cleaned it up. I don't even know her name, but I know more about her personal life than probably most of her friends do. I've heard my neighbor giving his granddaughter a xylophone. For birthday, I guess. She could play it well and kept playing for a while. Immediately after she left, I could hear him trying to play something his granddaughter played. He practiced for a solid hour until he managed to play this song correctly and stopped with a joyful yes. It was one of the purest things I've ever experienced. Late to this thread, but for a while I lived next to some Mormon missionaries. Super nice girls. I once apologized to them because my bird was a bit of a squeaker. They told me they didn't mind. I was homesick from work one day, and they were singing to my bird through the wall. It was so cute I almost died. My downstairs neighbor is a fit, active, and energetic woman in her mid-60s who looks like she's in her late 40s. She masturbates at almost any hour of the day, a few times a week, which normally would be fine. But she cries when she does it. She cries, moans, and calls out to God. It is incredibly strange, and it's the worst when it wakes me up at 3 AM. I heard a man yelling and slamming things around. Then heard a woman screaming and running around. I thought she was being raped or murdered. This happened at 3 AM. Turns out it was just a fucking bat flying around. A young couple moved in next door and they had to be late teens, early 20s. Every day, without fail, I would be unwillingly hear dramatic arguments about how his family doesn't accept her or that he was texting other girls. One time she yelled, "You don't fight for us, Kevin." I was so exasperated, yet so emotionally absorbed in this soap opera I had relentlessly been subjected to that I also yelled, "God damn it. Fight for her, Kevin." It was followed by eerie silence. I know it was wrong of me to interject myself. But shit, man. What about me? What about my feelings? They moved out shortly after that. Fucking Kevin. My upstairs neighbors taking turns zapping each other with a stun gun, hitting the floor, groaning in pain, and then laughing like Beavis and Butthead. I was woken up by the sound of my sweet mate's ass being slapped during some aggressive sex my freshman year of college. I hated it. I actually manage an apartment complex where my office is surrounded by a 1-bedroom unit. The building is old and the walls are thin. The tenant that used to live in the unit was a quiet man but would frequently sing beautiful opera music. His voice was amazing and I loved it every time I heard him sing. Then one time I saw him in the halls and made the mistake of asking if he was the one who sang these beautiful opera songs. His face turned red but he confirmed that it was him. I told him that I always enjoyed it when I heard him sing and that it would always brighten my day. I never should have said anything because I never heard him sing again. If you want to get nothing in return, you can like and join my Discord. There is a link in the description.